Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm excited that you chose to hang out with me yet again on Wisdom on Wednesday, and I'm Ray. I want to thank you for helping me with your comments, for helping me with sharing the video, for subscribing and encouraging friends to subscribe. I got good news. We're up to 400 subscriptions. We've been doing great work. I'm super excited and happy that the channel was growing in just over a year. Excited that today, as per usual, spending some time with the Lord, asking for a subject matter that could possibly help us to grow further, deeper and wider on this wisdom journey. And today, I want to talk about wise people. We've got to learn to own it. Wise people, we've got to learn to own it. I always have a story that can help us resonate and kind of help us correlate the connections to the principles of wisdom we want to actually think through today. When I was a young man, I got this BMX bicycle, and I was super excited about this BMX bicycle. But the ironic part about it was the neighborhood in which I grew up in, there wasn't a whole lot of new. So most of us had hand-me-downs, or possibly we built our own bike from parts. But this particular instance, I had a red BMX bike with a yellow seat. And I won't forget about this bike because I remember red Levi's had just came out. And I had some red Levi's and I was riding my bike. And when I got off, my seat wasn't yellow no more, it was red. That's besides the point. But this bike and its color stood out. And it got attention from everybody in the neighborhood. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody in the neighborhood. The bullies, the girls, and the goons. So this particular night, one of the goons told me he was going to ride my bike in front of my mother. And my mother was tough as nails, but she was 5'3" nothing. And he told me, let me ride that bike in front of my mother. And my mother looked right through him. And she looked at me and she said, don't you let that boy ride your bike. And I looked at her and I said, Mama, ain't nobody gonna ride my bike. So fast forward the story a couple of days later when my mother wasn't around, and this neighborhood goon walked up to me, put his hands on the handlebars. And if you're familiar with the BMX, once somebody has their hands on your handlebars, they pretty much have control of your bicycle. And he hit me with the old hood tail. He said, let me ride this around the corner. I knew deep down in my spirit I'd never see my bike again, but I had a choice to make. Was it willing for me to take my butt kicking, or was it willing to hope that this neighborhood bully would bring my bike back? So I relented and gave him my bike, and 1 hour went by, 2 hours went by. I was on the corner looking for my bike 6-7 hours later, and street lights were coming on. So now it was time for me to make a choice. Do I stand out here and wait for my bike, or do I go home and take this butt kicking for not listening to my mother? So I ended up going home, and the question she asked that I didn't want her to ask, where's your bike? I said, you know what? You tried to tell me about so-and-so and not letting him take my bike, and you was right. You was right, Mama. And she looked at me and she says, I don't want to be right, but you're wrong. I said, what do you mean? He took my bike and he didn't bring it back. She says, it doesn't matter who took your bike and who didn't bring it back. What matters is you got to own this loss. You had control of the situation and you chose to give it up. So now, in order for you to do better, feel better, respond better, you ultimately have to take ownership for your actions. That was a very hard lesson for an 8-year-old, but I never forgot it. What I learned from it, friends, is this. Regardless of whatever situation I am in life, regardless of whatever cards I've been dealt, regardless of whatever tragedy I may be reeling from, I have to own it. I have to play my part. I have to be honest about the condition that I'm currently in. As long as I give somebody else credit over the plight of my life, I'll remain a victim. So I encourage you today, wise friends, own it. Why should you own it? I know you've had a horrible situation. I know everybody doesn't understand the plight of your life. I know everybody doesn't know what you've gone through and what you had the challenges in. But I do know this. As long as your situation is somebody else's fault, you'll remain a victim. The day that you decide to own your it is the day that you take your power back. The day that you decide to own your it is the day you can say, it did take two to tangle. I didn't have to get in that relationship. I didn't have to take that job. I didn't have to keep that secret. But ultimately, today I want to decide that I'm no longer going to blame people for my circumstances. I'm going to own my part in the situation, because here's the thing, wise friend. As soon as we start owning our it, that's the day that we can change the rest of our lives. If we never ever own it, we'll always blame people for our situations. We'll always blame a parent who wasn't available. We'll always blame a sibling who got the most attention. We'll always blame people who treated us poorly. But ultimately, as soon as we take responsibility, now we can forgive those people and we can move on. We can forgive ourselves and we can move on. But as long as we have a party that we throw each other called a pity party, we'll stay in the same space and never be able to move to the next level in life. And all of us want to grow. All of us want to learn. We have to make certain that we know, as far as what Romans 28 tells us, 8 and 28 tells us, and we know that all things work together for them that love God and are called according to his purpose, meaning that the good, the bad, the ugly ultimately is a part of our growth. The good, the bad, the ugly is ultimately a part of our story. If we haven't gone through any of those things, our narrative would totally be different. But since this is a part of our story, that heartache was a part of your growing up. That baby that you had early may have saved your life. There may be some things in your past that may not have been fun while you were doing it, but ultimately, when you look back over the years in your life, those were things that actually formed you, things that shaped you, things that actually helped your worldview, helped you grow up, helped you understand your worth. You understand, sometimes we don't understand our worth until somebody has mishandled us. Sometimes we don't really understand the power of prayer until we have nothing left but a voice and a God in heaven. Sometimes we don't really recognize the strength that we have until we've gone through some things. So today, I just want to encourage you with this short message that you have to know exactly what happened, when it happened, and most importantly, own your part in it. Because as soon as you start owning it, that means you have ownership over that thing, and that thing no longer has ownership over you. Now you can actually keep your head up and recognize, now, since I am an owner of this thing, I can take equity out. Because when I'm renting or when I'm a victim, this is somebody else's equity. But now, since I own it, I can actually take equity out. I can actually take a testimony out of this experience. I can now take some learning, some knowledge out of this situation. There's a scripture that helps me understand this. If I was never afflicted, I would have never known that God is a healer. The Bible reminds us that God is a very present help in times of trouble. Many of us wouldn't be where we are in our relationships with the Lord if we hadn't had some trouble. So I want to encourage you today, stop pushing your it off on other folks. Stop pushing your low self-esteem off on people who didn't encourage you. Stop pushing off those things that happened to you on other people. Again, I empathize, and I don't want you to think that those things aren't important. They are. But ultimately, if you don't want that thing to be the boogeyman in your life, you've got to own it. You've got to recognize that that was not your fault of what that person did to you. But ultimately, you've got to own it, recognize it, and move on from it. So I hope that this word encouraged you today. I hope that this word inspires you to keep on going. I hope this word challenges you to look in the mirror and know that nobody can get you to where you need to be but you. Nobody can make you feel better but you. Nobody can help you get over those challenges in your past but you. Nobody can smile at you the way you can smile. So if you're looking for your life to change, wise friend, it starts with you owning your it. God bless you, and I pray you have a wonderful week. And remember, this is the day that you're going to start owning it. Take care now.